Hey everyone, today we're back again with our All About Chivalry 2 series with today offense. We'll be handling the rock paper scissor game, triple feints, getting around block, pressuring and much more. So, let's start off with the rock paper scissor of this game. Now, we're gonna keep it simple, so I'm gonna use an example of fighting a longsword versus a longsword. Of course, all of this changes if you take different weapons. So, very simple, slash beats stab. Stab beats overhead. Overhead beats slash. But only if it's all perfectly excelled. Now, how many times have you had a perfect fight? Not much in Chivalry 2. Since we can move out or go in, and we can slow it down and we can speed it up, it will change everything. But for starting fights, this is useful to know. People often favor one attack type if you fight them. If they have an opportunity to attack, they will show you which one they favor. The goal is to never be completely reliant on one attack type, but use all of them in combination. That's what we should all strive for, but it's harder than it actually is. Getting around blocks. This is advanced but will greatly increase the chance of you actually hitting your opponent. Always aim at the edges of your opponent. Good players will try to do this in a lot of ways. Dragging from the left with an alt slash is a good one. Stabbing while your opponent is showing his back or his side is a mighty good one as well. You can also overhead that go over the block or can be dragged over the block. So, we can do it with all three attack types, slash, overheads and stab. This is why no particular attack is the best. It all works together and you should learn to combine them as much as you can. This is why sometimes switching up your playstyle against people using one attacks can do so much. And this is what people often forget when they get into the habit of one playstyle. Countering people for a while and then people adapt. The person who can adapt the most will have the advantage. Triple feint. The name says it all, it's a tool we can use to close distance while making our opponent second guess what we're gonna do and which attack type we're gonna use. You can still attack a couple of times, you can even do it more than 3 times, it can be less, it doesn't matter. It's a risky move to pull off, sure, but sometimes risks are needed to be taken. Keep in mind, cancelling attacks does cost a lot of stamina, so it won't be a safe option, but it's a tool that we can take from the toolbox and use it to our advantage. My old friend Jaegerman has a video in the description showing it off in more detail. Kicks, a mighty useful tool, but one that's easily punished by people who know how kicks work. So, how do we use defensively? Well, the best way to kick is to do it when your enemy expects a counterattack and is going to block and not slash back. The most important part to land a kick is to not give your opponent's reaction time. A kick is a risk you take to get through your opponent. The only somewhat safe moment is when your opponent missed an attack and won't be able to attack back quick enough. Jabs. It's a simple utility in combat and can be used to gain back initiative when hit or using it whenever your opponent doesn't expect it. However, mastering this tool will make you very strong in 1v1 situations. Jabs are at their most powerful when you bait an opponent's counter attack with a cancel attack and jab them in their windup. You make them lose a lot of stamina whilst you keep your initiative. This is a good combination with fast weapons like the longsword, and it's a very good pressuring tool once your opponent fears your jabs. Jumps. Something new that people are experimenting with is jumping over overheads and coming down with an alt overhead or a normal overhead. I have personally not used this much, but it's something wonderful and skillful and should be used and practiced. Again, it does cost a lot of stamina, but if you land a hit, it's worth it. Throwing. I have gained a new appreciation for throwing and I'll tell you why. Simply put, people have agreed that throwing your weapon is allowed / respected in duels, and my rule is, if it's allowed in a tournament, use it. Even if people don't like it, since other people might use it against you and it's better to adapt than stay behind. So, when should we throw our weapons? When we have space to throw and not get an instant attack punish. Overall, it's a risk. Some good moments are to do it. When people do specials that are out of range, when they're low on stamina, so it will disarm them, or when they switch weapons. All of these points are when I would throw my weapon. Of course, sometimes if I think I get a bigger advantage from not throwing, by not taking the risk, I'll do that. This is something people might not agree with, but here it goes. It's the Dane axe, long sword, great sword, two-handed hammer, and the messer. You might ask, why do you choose these 5 when you have something as broken as the war club or rapier? Well, I'll tell you. These are all-round dueling weapons. They are able to deal with at least 75% of all the weapons they fight. Now, there are some hard counters to all these weapons, for example the one-headed sword countering the greatsword, and the poleaxe having a good time against the longsword. But that's the reason I choose these 5. They are able to deal with most other weapons in a nice way. They have good stam management, they don't have giant drawbacks, and they're a good all-around thing to learn if you want to learn a weapon. I would recommend one of these 5s, it will make you a better player. So, for combos, if you land an attack, you have a slight moment to hit again before your opponent can react. They're gonna be forced into blocking or get an extra hit. Well, if they block it, you've won a little bit of stamina, which is great. Pretty much, if you get a combo, try and do another combo. You can also morph it into other things to make sure you get a hit in by going for the edges, for example. It all works. Try it. Always try the combo after you land a hit. It will just help you out. Pressuring. So, pressuring from fast XLs to slower drag attacks, it's all about having your opponent and moving forward and not falling for obvious traps that people will set up when they're in defensive mode. They're just looking for an opportunity to take back control. Don't let them, for as long as you can, but when it's time to switch, you know it. But to keep the pressure up, it's about drags and XLs. Try to XL extra and start dragging when you have a bit more extra space. Force people to look to counter you and control them, and not the other way around, cause then you lose. Long attacks. When you have an opponent who always tries to go into defensive mode after you won a pressure fight, it's worth doing follow-up attacks with long attacks. This is where you overshoot your attacks into long overheads. They are the key here, and they will oftentimes reach your opponent and they will be forced into a block, which hurts their stamina, making it easier to get a disarm and get a free hit in. One of the more riskier moves, but worth learning, the way we use it is when we have momentum from a counter or a riposte. We can quickly turn around and hit him from the other side. We can also add a morph and make it even longer, but this will be riskier. We can also do a non-counter spin. The best way I found to do this is by taking a small break before turning, before we engage in the swing itself, so you can quickly turn around and not have the turn cap problems and be quicker to your opponent. So, flow and breaking flow. At certain points in a fight, you will get into what we call the flow. So, your opponent and you are both perfectly countering each other, you seem to know each other's every move, and at this point it's for one of you to decide to break the flow or not. Every time you try and break the flow, it's usually 2 ways out. You either gamble for a lucky hit that you know might or not hit, or you can break contact and manage to break away. It's something that will come a lot in dueling. Pauses. When you have the upper hand, sometimes doing nothing is the best option. Just give the opponent a second to do something, then react to what they are doing. This is how you get into people's head. This is the tool people use to read you like a book, since this is when people panic and you can punish them for panicking, and you can keep your control over them. Combining everything. Use everything. This is what we strive for. We want to be comfortable enough with all these things so we can use them all the times when we need to. Just find the right moments, combine a tech move. Use slash, overheads and stabs. Don't ever stick to one of them. Good players will see right through you if you spam one attack type. It might work on some players. Also incorporate dodges, dragging, XL, dodges, jabs and kicks. Use everything at your disposal. If you don't, you will notice that you're missing a piece of the puzzle. Try not to get into the habit of getting comfortable with one attack moveset and keep experimenting, adapt, overcome and try to improve. Anyway, thank you all for listening. Hopefully you learned something that helps you out in the duel yard. If you enjoyed it, a like is mighty appreciated, and stay dueling.